Welcome to Savage Camp. I am Vishu and today we are going to dive deep into the game changer of infrastructure management, also known as infrastructure as code or IaC. Now, if you want to become a top-notch infrastructure engineer, infrastructure as a code is a non-negotiable. Knowing infrastructure as a code will help you design systems and architecture that will be more scalable, reliable, and efficient in nature. Whether it would be on the cloud or on-prem data centers, infrastructure as a code is the key to automating most of your infrastructure operations. So what exactly is IaC? Well, IaC at its core is nothing but managing and provisioning computing infrastructure through machine readable definition files instead of using your physical hardware and going through the options manually. Think of it as you're treating your infrastructure as a software. What I mean by this is you write code for your software and the software does various things based on the code that you have written. Well, in the same scenario, you can write code for your infrastructure and you can design, deploy and scale your infrastructure resources from code and manage them consistently and repeatedly. Well, now that we have covered what IaC is and why we use it, let's look at some of the examples that you will come across when you use IaC. Well, the most common one that you will see in most of the companies that use cloud or have on-prem data centers is called Terraform. Terraform is an open source tool which is created by HashiCorp and it is used to design an infrastructure and write code in a human readable language where you will deploy resources, infrastructure resources on the infrastructure all via your code. And that is why we use Terraform. Terraform has one common language which you can use to deploy resources on Google Cloud or Amazon AWS or Microsoft Azure or OpenShift. All of these cloud providers support Terraform and there are various plugins and a lot of other cloud providers for which you can use Terraform to write code to deploy your resources. And now let's look into the second one, which is called Ansible, which is made by Red Hat. Ansible is an automation tool used for configuring servers and managing them. You can use Ansible to install a specific set of packages on a specific set of servers and have them ready as soon as they are deployed. Now what this does is you can have a different set of softwares for your traders, you can have a different set of softwares for your software engineers, you can have a different set of softwares for front end and back end engineers. You can design all of this in Ansible so that whenever we deploy any servers, all of these are automatically installed on the specific servers that are designed for specific engineers. The last and the least common you will see is AWS Cloud Formation. And the reason you will not see this more is because it is only supported by AWS and it is only for AWS. So if a company is heavily using AWS and instead of going for open source tool like Terraform, they are using CloudFormation, that's when you will have to learn about CloudFormation. Alright, enough theory, let's look into a practical example of using Terraform to deploy infrastructure resources on your infrastructure. In this example, we are just going to deploy an EC2 instance on AWS and put it in a subnet and virtual private cloud. So I am going to make this quick and let's start with it. So we start with the provider, we put in the resource for AWS VPC and name the resource as my VPC. Then we put in a resource for AWS subnet and name it as my subnet. And then we will put in a resource for our, actually we need to put in the CIDR block and availability zone. And after this, let's put in the AWS instance resource, which is named web server with an AMI ID and instance type. And we also need to tag this so we know it is created by Terraform. Now we'll do a Terraform init, which will initialize the Terraform in our current directory. This will download the provider AWS packages and the necessary files for Terraform to run. Once it is successfully initialized, let's do a plan. Plan will basically tell you what it is going to do and it is saying that it will create the instance, the subnet and VPC. So 3 to add, which is 3 resources it is going to create, and once you do an apply, you will see it will ask you to confirm. You do an yes, and you will see that the instance is being deployed right now. So if I go back, I see an error because the availability zone is incorrect. So I did a 2A, and now I did an apply again, and now I'm getting a error on the subnet. So I tried to change the CIDR block for the subnet, and the error still persisted after this. So I have to go and change the VPC CIDR. Once I change this, it is going to recreate and successfully deploy the VPC and the subnet. So we see the instance is running right now, and if we go to the security groups, it will have a security group, and if we go to VPC, we can see our VPC attached over here and also the subnet. So now to get rid of everything, you run Terraform destroy, and it is going to destroy everything it created. So now that we have seen an example of deploying code via infrastructure as a code tool like Terraform, let's go over the best practices you need to know while using infrastructure as a code as an infrastructure engineer. The first and foremost thing is, when you're writing code, you need to use a version control. And the reason for using a version control is you can track all the changes that you're making to the infrastructure, you can collaborate with your teammates, and you can keep a history or a revision of everything that you have done. So if anything breaks, you can go back to a particular period in time and deploy the infrastructure as it was at that time. The second one is to modularize your code, which means that you write code and break it down into reusable functions and modules so that you don't have to repeat any code again and again. This is more useful when you are deploying the same stuff over and over again for different teams. For example, every team in your company is going to use the same configuration for the network. So instead of writing it over and over again for each team, you write one module and you call that module while deploying resources for different teams. The third and the most important best practice is not to deploy to production directly, but having an intermediate staging environment where you would test things before it goes to production. What I mean by this is, when you have a dev environment, which is a development environment where you write code and test it out, instead of just promoting the code to production environment, it's always good to have a staging environment in between. The staging environment would be designed same as the production environment, but it won't be live in production, which means that it is not visible to the users. So whenever you write code and you want to test how it would look to the users or how it would be when it is deployed in production, you deploy it in staging and you see and you test it out. So that's it for this video, guys. I hope this was helpful, and I'll be making some more videos on Terraform because it is the most common tool that I've seen in interviews, and a lot of companies are using Terraform. So I think it's a must-have tool in your skill set if you're trying to become an infrastructure engineer. But that is it for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed this, and I will see you guys in the next one.